here's something that I don't know if it's been picked up yet. It's picked up by Truth Out, a website that I go to frequently for news and personal columns, because I like that website, commondreams.org, truthout.com, I believe. But there's a piece there by Sasha Abramsky, and she points out that back during the Orange Bastard's first presidency, the guy he appointed to be the U.S. ambassador to Germany, Richard Grenell, who was a real fascist fuckwad, he made the comment back then that the Trump administration was hoping to and going to make every effort to boost the forces of the neo-Nazi right throughout Europe. This fucker went to Germany and made that statement, right? And what Grenell was saying was right along with Trump's dislike of the overarching principles of the European Union, which controls an awful lot of what goes on among the, 30, 40 states that are part of the European Union. Trump loved Brexit, the idea that the UK should get out of the European Union, get out and try to collapse it, which they almost did. And Trump's very public efforts to get leaders like Angela Merkel and Germany to clamp down on immigration from outside of Europe. And in fact, according to Truth Out, shortly after Grenell's comments a couple of years ago, back during Trump's first administration, media reports were out there that said the Orange Bastard was hoping to see Angela Merkel ousted as German Chancellor. Well, she no longer is German Chancellor, is she? The point here, this fall, nearly 7 years after this neo-Nazi Grenell made his pro-Nazi statements, here we are 7 years later. Grenell, who is a promoter of an internationally styled alliance for the hard right globally, the neo-fascists globally. He was apparently on the short list to become Trump's new Secretary of State. Now, there's something that I want to reference here. You and I weren't around, but we have read about it, haven't we? And what I'm talking about is in the 1930s, the huge move in this country to promote fascism, specifically Nazism. The German-American Bund, which was really the Nazi-American Bund, the ideas that were put out by American industrialists, including Henry Ford and Pierre DuPont and some of the prominent superstars, cultural superstars in this country back in the 30s and 40s, said that what we should be doing was aligning with the Nazis and the British. All the three major, this is a bullshit statement, I'm going to use it anyway, the three major white nations on the earth: United States, I'm way over my head here, Great Britain, and Russia. And what we were supposed to do is beat the fuck out of, totally defeat, decimate, remove all the so-called colored races. Get rid of them. We don't need them. And this effort was being promoted not just in this country, but in various places around the globe. Now, I know this because I've read about it, just like I'm sure you have. Well, what goes around comes around, or whatever the bullshit phrase is. Here we are again. We have this Grenell fucker and Trump pushing. Now, Grenell wasn't selected to be Secretary of State, obviously. They got somebody better to be Secretary. Jesus Christ. Oh, stop me if you've heard this. He wasn't selected. He lost out to you know who. Marco Rubio. And you know, the damnedest thing, I keep hearing comments from Democrats, well, he's not so bad. Matter of fact, he will probably be a good Secretary of State. Really? Marco Rubio? Okay. Because he's got more, establishment credentials. That means hard right Christian Nazi credentials. Marco Rubio does. Okay. Trump's victory, as tiny as it was, nevertheless, is adding size to the balls of these far-right political groups and leaders throughout Europe. Because now they have an ally in the United States. They have their own American Nazi. There he is. Yay! Immediately after the election, and I think I may have talked about this, you may have heard it through another source, but the Prime Minister of Hungary, Viktor Orban, a guy who has been almost worshipped by Trump and this fucking American Nazi Tucker Carlson and this sick goddamn Stalinist Steve Bannon and other MAGA prominent people. They have almost worshipped Orban for his champion of what Orban calls illiberal democracy, as opposed to liberal democracy. Isn't that cute? Illiberal democracy. And Orban has this belief that liberals are pushing the great replacement. We're doing this, liberals. We're pushing the great replacement of white Christian Europeans and Americans. And Orban announced after the election results were decided here in the United States, he announced that Orban, had downed vodka in celebration of Trump's win. Oh, that is so fucking, well, fill in the rest of that sentence. They're celebrating Trump. Now, this admiration between Orban and American Nazis, which include Tucker Carlson and Trump and Steve Bannon, and this crazy son of a bitch, Mike Johnson, who is the Christian nutfuck who is the Speaker of the House. I mean, this is what the American Nazis, all dead now, what they had hoped for back in the 30s. This is what they wanted. They wanted a president. They wanted advisors to the president who were so insistent on supporting Nazism that it would have been a fait accompli, and we never would have gone to war with the fascists. Can you imagine how this country would have been remade, how the globe would have been remade if the Nazis and the Italian fascists and the Spanish fascists had succeeded, but they didn't succeed? Well, maybe I've got that wrong. Maybe they were just suppressed, and now here they are again. So anyway, Orban has been clamping down on the free press in Hungary. His populism is pretty much defined by racism and sexism and homophobia. I mean, if you're a woman, if you're a person of color, if you happen to be in the LGBTQ community, in this country, you now have the worst kind of enemies, similar to the enemies the Jews had in Germany in the 1930s. You now have the worst kind of enemies. And if they're enemies of the gay community here in the United States, if they're enemies of women, if they're enemies of people of color, then they're fucking my enemies too. These are the enemies that we have in this country now. And they are prepared to run the country. This country. Orban's manipulation of the electoral system in Hungary to ensure that his neo-Nazi Fidesz party, his manipulation has largely made him an outlier in the EU at this point, but he's become a hero of the Nazis in the United States. And in 2022, this filthy fascist prick addressed the CPAC conference, the usual circle jerk and gathering of these Nazi fuckers in the United States. Conservative Political Action Conference, which might as well be called the Christian Nazi movement because that's what it is. 3 years ago, I should say 3 years on, in a Washington, D.C., in our government, other than the executive branch, which has totally been Trumpified now. All these cowardly son of a bitches in the House and the Senate who wait until they get their order from Trump when to take a piss. But in this Trumpified Washington, Orban will almost certainly be toasted as a great leader of what Trump will refer to as European values. That means white oppression, suppression, apartheid. It's here, goddammit. I mean, South African apartheid was nothing more than a racialized form of Nazism. If you talk to your friends who happen to be Jews and ask them what their grandparents or their great aunt or their great uncle may have told them of the stories of what it was like to live in Eastern Europe during the rise of Nazism, not just Germany, but Eastern Europe, then you'll have somewhat of a picture of what we are now facing in this country. And please keep in mind that this, like Hitler in Germany, this was not imposed on us from the outside. This is what the American fucking voters in the slight majority who elected Trump, this is what they wanted. You know, black folk have been trying to tell us for 300 years. Black folk have been trying to tell us white people, oppression of anybody is oppression of everybody. Denial of human rights to anybody is denial of human rights to everybody. It's coming to get you, white people. We've been trying to fucking tell you this for 300 years, but no, you wouldn't listen. And here it is. This is what, in my conversations with black folk that I still have conversations with, and it grieves me, but I understand the suspicion now because I happen to be predominantly white. You know, I'm one of those white people that were looked at as non-white back at the turn of the 20th century. Italian and Irish. Scum. Both races. Scum. Or both nationalities. Scum. Like the Jews. Jews, Italians, Irish. Get them the fuck out of this country. Okay. So I have a slight affinity, very slight, with my black brothers and sisters in this country. And I've told the story before. My mother was so dark-skinned in a small town in northwest Ohio that when I saw her 8th grade graduation picture of 35 or so white kids, I was able to pick my mother immediately because she looked dark. She was dark-skinned. And my mother told me that there were instances of bigotry and prejudice against her. Does your dad carry a knife? No, why would he carry a knife? Because he's a Dago. You guys are Dagos, right? You're wops. Woo. So no, I have not lived the black experience, but I have paid attention to what black folk have been trying to tell us white people, if you don't mind my including myself in the white race, what they've been trying to tell us white people for 2 or 3 centuries now, and we didn't listen. And here it is. Here it fucking is. Now what do we do? Well, I said that in a different historical moment, but I'll say it again because I think it applies. If you have black friends, you might decide to get together, have a beer, and invite them over for dinner, meet them at a social club, whatever. Meet with your black friends and ask them how to cope. Now, I'm serious. I'm serious. For the most part, white liberals do not associate with black folk, which is a real fucking shame. We talk the talk, but very few of us walk the walk. So, okay. I know you must have black friends, and by God, if you don't, you better fucking make some soon. Because black folk in this country will be able to give us white people some very critical information on how to survive this. They've been surviving it for 250 years. They know, my white brothers and sisters, they know how to move through this society, drawing the least bit of attention and still doing, for the most part, what they want to do without the privileges that white complexion gives them. Even in Argentina, where the new president, Javier Milei, a self-described anarcho-capitalist. How's that? That sounds like something Hitler would say. He's been breaking apart his country's democratic institutions. And he's been rallying to Trump's cause in Argentina, right? Around Europe. Other far-right proto-Nazis revel in Trump's victory. Alice Weidel and Bjorn Höcke, the leaders of Germany's Alternative for Germany party, AfD party, which has its roots in Nazi ideology. Geert Wilders, the politically powerful far-right leader in the Netherlands, writing in capital letters on X, Wilders wrote, quote, all caps, "Congratulations, President Trump. Congratulations, America. Never stop. Always keep fighting and win elections." And that post is indicative of the feeling on the far right in Europe that Trump's win pushes them too so much closer to power in their various countries. Powers of the Nazi right. Hi, Truth Seekers. Mike Malloy here. You know, the Progressive Voices Network brings you commercial-free commentary from today's leading progressive radio hosts and pundits, like me, Mike Malloy, 24 hours a day. I'm not your typical old guy from the 80s or the 90s talk radio host, and Progressive Voices is not your typical talk radio network. It's a listener-supported nonprofit with no corporate control whatsoever over our broadcast. So hosts like me, Mike Malloy, are free to rant and scream and carry on about whatever we like. We're often controversial, but we're never boring. Weeknights, 9 p.m. in the East, 6 p.m. in the West on the Progressive Voices Network. Always progressive, always on. I'm Mike Malloy. Keep it lit.